Give me your number one takeaway from the Nuggets winning in the Jokic thing.
Well, again, I look at it as what we were talking about on Get Up, is that it could start to change the league a little bit. Not just it's going to be very hard to find 7-footers who are 290 pounds, and yet are fleet of foot, great passers, great touch with their shot, impactful defensively. Like, that's hard to find. He made himself, and you really have to credit everything that he has done with his career when they made him a second-round pick. And he comes over. He had a Pepsi habit that he had to kick. He used to drink 3 bottles of Pepsi a day. A day. That's crazy. They had to get him out of that. They had to get him in the right shape he had to be in. But you see the skill that's there, right? So are we now looking at not necessarily the 7-footers and the return of the big man? I actually am looking at it as, and I've made this comparison with him many times. I don't know if you saw it. I compare him to Patrick Mahomes. He's the Patrick Mahomes of the NBA. And the joke I made was they both wear 15, they both own Denver. Because Mahomes has never lost to the Broncos.
That's right.
But Jokic, because it's whatever you take away, he's got to counter for it. Not exactly looks like a tremendous athlete. Mahomes as well, not a real runner. But when you make him run, he can get away with it. He can get there. And that's what Jokic is. Extremely smart, high IQ. But the passing ability, his willingness to pass, his selflessness, all of those things to me are appealing to NBA fans, to basketball fans, to sports fans. And I think they're almost begging the league to get to an era where there is a quarterback on the floor that makes everybody else better. It's more appealing to watch.
Yeah, I will expand on these thoughts that I'm about to share a little bit later in the show. But Graziano, my basic feeling on it, and we touched on this at the end of Get Up today, is that right now, Nikola Jokic feels like he's one of one.
Yeah.
But I think eventually we're going to say he was the beginning of a new era. He ushers in a new era where every NBA team is going to want the person who was primarily responsible for handling the ball when they run their half-court offense to be as tall as possible. There are enormous and obvious advantages to that guy being 7 feet tall and being able to handle the ball the way he does. I'm the one who has been saying from the time he came into the league, LeBron James was put on this earth to be the best point guard that ever lived.
Yes.
For some reason, he has always been, and teams have always been somewhat hesitant to just fully take advantage of that. But on some level, this is what LeBron is. LeBron and Nikola Jokic aren't that different.
Can I push back?
Go.
LeBron wants to be that. We wouldn't let him. Remember? He would pass. Kobe got into him one time in an all-star game because he passed.
Right.
And he would tell him, shoot it, man. We kept saying he was afraid to take the shot when LeBron was always trying to make the right play.
Right,
I don't think we let him do it.
But what I'm saying is, Nikola Jokic still averaged 30 points a game doing this.
Yeah.
So LeBron could do that. What I'm saying is, LeBron James is the guy with the ball in his hands when they initiate your half-court offense basically all the time. And that's what Nikola Jokic is. And that is a position that historically has been occupied by people who are more Dan Graziano size than Alan Hahn size.
A little bigger.
If we were to change the scale a little bit.
Yeah.
And that's what I think is going to change. Every team is going to want that guy now, someone who is 6'8" or above, to be running their offense.
You can want it, but I mean, like, how are you going to find? That's a lot of pressure on the
You're
scouts.
going to find it, but you're going to find it. And it's happening in Europe, obviously.
Well, they're developing them.
They are developing these guys with skills.
Yes.
Because they're not just trying to win like we're doing over here. Right now, we have the leagues in which young people play are very focused on winning their leagues.
Yeah.
And so I've seen it. I mean, I've watched this happen. And so you got kids that are not being developed this way. In other countries, they do it, and they'll start doing it here now that we see what this is going on. It starts with a kid who's going to be 6'10", being taught point guard skills rather than being taught post-up skills.
Right. And look, obviously, this is a different level. I mean, you could have the second best guy ever to do it, and he still might not be able to do the number of different things that Jokic could. I mean, like, watching Mahomes, you get the same feeling, right? Like, it's ridiculous that he can do that. Oh, it's ridiculous that he can also do that.
That he feels it. He knew to do that. That's what I always say about Jokic is how did he even know to do that?
Seeing it differently than everybody else. But it's just the capability, the number of different ways that he can just crush you. Like, I'm thinking he probably also cooks the meal after the game. Like, if the fire alarm went off, he would organize everybody and get them out of there. Like he can do literally everything. Mm-hmm. And I mean, it's spectacular. So, yeah, you may be right, Greeny, but I think it's a long way to get there. And I think it seems like even if you find that, even if you're able, a couple of teams are able to find it, it seems like it would behoove most teams to also be thinking about, well, how do we stop it? Because I don't think 30 teams are going to be able to find that.
Well, but that's the point, is that it becomes the hardest thing to stop in the entire
But you know what
NBA.
else you need, though?
Yeah.
You might not be able to find the 7-footer with all that skill set, but you'd have to find a 7-footer that at least can contain that other 7-footer.
Right,
that
which he
has
didn't
that.
run into.
Which what we have a lot of times, especially in America, our 7-footers, our players that we're developing at the younger ages and through college, we turn them into athletic bigs that can just catch alley-oops. So the guards pick and roll, catch alley-oops. The pick and roll was a dominant play in the league. It's been forever, obviously, but it really became a thing with Mike D'Antoni. The high screen roll, the diver is the big man who just is waiting for when the double comes for off the screen, throw it in the air. Amari Stoudemire was a great example of that. He and Steve Nash did it to perfection.
Yeah.
We started developing guys to do what Amari does. And now it's dribble handoff. It's not the same thing. So now it's the option dribble handoff, or I keep it. You got to have a skill. You got to have the ability to understand, like in the moment, what's the better play. That is a different kind of teaching than it is, I just need to find 7-footers that can jump, scrape the ceiling, and throw down alley-oops and block shots. I need to find a big man that's got soft hands who can pass and can read the game.
Well, look, we're a week and a day away from getting what we think is going to be the next one, right? Victor Wembanyama is going to get drafted, and as Wendy just said, he's a 7'5" point guard. Now, he doesn't have anywhere near the girth that Nikola Jokic does, but you don't have to. There are a lot of different ways to do what I'm talking about, but I think every team is going to want it. And look, the Nuggets not only just won the championship, but if Jamal Murray doesn't tear up his knee, they may very well have won one before this. They could wind up being the team to beat for some time here. Steph Curry changed basketball, not just because every kid now is out there chucking up long threes, but because what teams figured out, and I remember having this conversation with Shaquille O'Neal when Steph first started becoming a thing, when Steph first started becoming what Steph has become. So something in the neighborhood of 2014 or 15, something like that. Shaq came on Mike and Mike, and I remember we asked him about this. Zach Lowe had made the point that Steph Curry was having a Shaq-like effect on the NBA, but in the reverse. You know, for every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. So Shaq used to collapse defenses. Where he was, everyone needed to go. And so the defense would all become as small as it could possibly become because they were all down there dealing with this one seemingly unstoppable force, and that would leave all this free room on the floor. What Steph did is he stretched the defense like a rubber band. Picture a rubber band being stretched to the point we all know that moment when a rubber band has been stretched as far as it possibly can before it breaks. That's what Steph has done. And doing that opens up the floor in the opposite but similar way. All of a sudden, there's all this empty space because you have to account for an area of the floor that you've never had to account for before. And that's the way that Steph Curry changed basketball, and that's what has made him one of the greatest and most important players ever. I think Nikola Jokic could be the next one. I think Nikola Jokic is going to become the standard that everyone aspires to. And let's be clear. Are there a million 7'1" guys running around the earth right now with his skills? No. But no one saw this coming. Most of this was stuff that he trained himself to do, that he worked himself into a place that he could do. He said himself to Malika, no one believed in the fat boy when he got drafted. He was the 41st pick in the draft because he wasn't in shape. And no one projected him to be this. If anyone had projected him to be anything like this, 40 picks would not have gone by before someone said his name. So the point I'm trying to make is you can develop these guys. You can start teaching players who project to be very tall at a young age point guard skills. You know who has those is Karl Anthony Towns. Karl Anthony Towns' father was a basketball coach and had him playing point guard when he was little, even though he projected to be that tall. Anthony Davis has all of these skills because he had this late growth spurt in his life. He was already into high school before he became a big. He wasn't big when he was little, to use the expression that is so frequently popular and kind of funny. And so he has all of these skills that traditionally the bigs have not had. Well, you can throw that tradition out the window. From now on, if you've got a kid who projects to be 6'8" or above, you train that kid the same way you would a super talented kid who's going to be 6'2" or 6'3". Put the ball in his hands. Teach him to distribute. See the floor. There will be more Nikola Jokic's. Everyone's going to want one. And of course, not everyone's going to have one, just like everyone doesn't have a Steph Curry. But there are other guys out there who shoot like Steph. Trae Young came along, and there are others in the pipeline, and there will be more. Because once you see something out there is as effective as it is, people will start trying to do it, and a few of them will be able to. Now, obviously, the pool of those who can do what Jokic does is going to be a lot smaller because there are a lot more people Steph Curry size than there are Nikola Jokic's size. But there will be some. The planet has 8 billion people on it, and this is a very, very global game. Maybe besides soccer, the most global of the team sports. So there will be others coming. And so Nikola Jokic, I think, will go from being one of one to being the first of many. Now, I don't know what many means. Will there be 6 of him? Will there be 10 of him? More than that is probably unrealistic. But I don't think he'll be the only one for long. So that, I think, is the most important thing to say about Nikola Jokic. There's nothing else to be said about his performance. His performance was the greatest in the history of the NBA postseason. Now, you want to try and put that into some sort of larger context, you can do it however you want. You want to say that he wasn't playing against the greatest competition? Yeah, he played 2 8 seeds along the way. It happened. You don't get to choose the teams you play against. No one ever did. Did he play against any Hall of Famers? Well, I mean, he played against Kevin Durant, he played against LeBron, and he played against Anthony Davis. They won 10 of 11 playoff games in a stretch to win the NBA championship. So I think if you're finding any flaws in Nikola Jokic or taking apart any of what he did, you're just trying to. If you try to take apart anything, if you try to diminish anything in sports, you can. But I think you'd have to want to in the case of Jokic. I myself don't want to. I want to bask in what we just saw. I'm one who had, and I'm forever fortunate to have had a first-class season. That's not the wrong word. An up-close and first look. What's the word I'm looking for? I was there. What's that? A front row seat, yeah. And I wasn't literally in the front row, but I was there when Michael Jordan made a lot of his greatest runs. Jordan in the playoffs in 92, 93. No one's ever been better, in my opinion. But what Jokic has just done is completely unprecedented. For one player to lead the entire postseason in points, rebounds, and assists, it shouldn't be possible. That's what I'm saying. It shouldn't be possible. Now, could Wilt Chamberlain have done it if he set his mind to it? He probably could have. Could Hakeem Olajuwon have done it? That's a guy who, there were times that he had triple-doubles that included blocked shots. But if you're going to try and pick apart anything about Nikola Jokic, in my opinion, it's only because you're trying to. And I'm not exactly sure why you would try to. Let's just sit back and enjoy the greatness that we just witnessed, because it was epic. Here's what I'm saying and what I'm not saying about Jokic. Anyone who's saying Jokic is the best big, no, stop. Stop. And this is me. I am the master of the overstatement, saying, don't say that yet. That's ridiculous. It's been a much too small of a sample size. What he just had is the greatest postseason that anyone has ever had. No one has ever been more effective, more directly responsible. Plenty of players have been take them off the team and they don't win a championship. Practically every championship ever won, you could say that about. If you took Jordan off the Bulls, if you took Duncan off the Spurs, if you took Shaq off of those Laker teams, well, it doesn't make any difference. You take any of them off, they wouldn't win. And so in the same way that if you took Jokic off, it wouldn't win. So that's not the way you compare them. You can't do more different things to have your team win than Nikola Jokic did. He did all of it. He orchestrated and ran every single thing they did. So was it the best postseason that any player's ever had? Absolutely. I don't even know that that's an opinion. It's just an obvious statement of fact. Now, you want to start connecting it to who his competition was and all the rest of that? Go ahead. That's the beauty of all these things. They become great conversation pieces. But you cannot take away from what he just accomplished. And when you put it into historical perspective, that's the perspective it belongs in. It's the greatest postseason any player ever had. It does not make him the greatest center of all time, or even close. If you're making a list of the greatest players in NBA history right now, he's not on it yet. I get 2 MVPs and this. So he's working his way toward it, but it takes a little time. One of the elements of becoming an all-time great player is doing it for a long time. I'm here to tell you as one who was old enough to have seen it, that the player who absolutely had Nikola Jokic-like skills and talent was Bill Walton. Bill Walton, who most people now only know as a commentator who says goofy things and who is one of my favorite people, was also about the most skilled big man the game ever had. And then his feet gave out on him, as has happened to so many of the all-time great bigs. And he had a brief renaissance in Boston as the sixth man of the year coming off the bench and playing a huge role in one of the great teams ever, the 86 Celtics. But if Bill Walton had had a full career, totally healthy, Bill Walton would be right there with anybody. When we talk about the great centers, Russell, Chamberlain, Kareem, Shaq, Hakeem, whoever else you want to put there, whenever Jokic someday winds up on that list, Bill Walton would be at or near the top of it. And he could do a lot of these things.
Thank you for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming sports and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.